This morning, as the violence goes unchecked in the Middle East, a distinguished documentarian shares some images and insight into the underlying issues behind the Middle East crisis.
This is the Emmy Award-winning WB11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. As the fighting in the Middle East continues this weekend, diplomats once again are trying to find a way to peace. Israel asserts it has a right to defend itself. Palestinian extremists say they have a right to fight for a land they claim is theirs. Well, those are a couple of very simple, short sentences that highlight a long and complex situation, decades, even centuries in the making. This morning, we get to see rare images and insight through a renowned French filmmaker who has produced two incredible documentaries that delve into the underlying causes of the ongoing conflict. One, From the River to the Sea, traces the path that culminated in the victory for Hamas in the Palestinian elections. The other, Suicide Killers, is a riveting look at the root causes that produce people who kill themselves and as many others as they can for a cause they believe will carry them to paradise. Our guest this morning is Pierre Rehov. He has produced 7 films. Suicide Killers, excerpts from which you'll see on this morning's program, will open at the AMC Theater on 42nd Street in Manhattan on August 25th. Pierre, thank you so much for coming in. I've seen clips from both of your remarkable documentaries, and what I'd like to get from you before we see some of these clips is somewhat of an overview. You spent the last 2-3 years working on these documentaries, and you've traveled throughout the region, through Israel and through the Arab countries. What insight can you provide about what is behind all of what's going on?
First of all, I really appreciate being with you today. But what I have to answer to that, things are much more complicated than they really appear in the media, because in 30 seconds you cannot really address 60 years of tough conflict. I've been mostly traveling in Palestinian refugee camps for the film you just talked about, From the River to the Sea. And first of all, it's a question of semantic, because when you think of a Palestinian refugee camp, you think in terms of tents. But I've visited places which look like poor suburbs. So the reality doesn't exactly fit with what people really believe it is. Now, when a Palestinian talks about occupation and fights for his freedom, you think in terms of Gaza or the West Bank. For the Palestinian, most Palestinian, occupation is Tel Aviv. The state of Israel for him is legitimate, and this is the reason why they all call for a Palestinian state, most of them, From the Jordan River to the Sea, which is the title of my film.
I think one of the things we want to find out is, how did this all originate? Why are so many Palestinians living in refugee camps rather than being a part of the society of the Jordans and the Egypts and the Syrias? Before you answer the question, I think we might get a better understanding by looking at this composite which we have put together from your film, From the River to the Sea. And this focuses on one of the underlying causes of the whole Middle East crisis, and it's the Palestinian so-called right of return. Take a look.
نحن أولا ويجب أن تكون هذه الصورة واضحة. نحن ككل الفلسطينيين وكل الإسلاميين في أي مكان نقول أن فلسطين هي من حدود لبنان إلى حدود مصر ومن البحر إلى النهر.
حدثنا وعبرنا عن هذا الموقف بكل تصريحاتنا. احنا ما زلنا نناضل من أجل عودة اللاجئين إلى ديارهم وفق القرارات الشرعية الدولية.
While their claim to the right of return, long made unenforceable due to the many years of conflict, has always been the first condition for peace.
فلسطين للفلسطينيين ونقول حق العودة حق العودة حق العودة حق العودة حق العودة.
نحن لا يمكن أن نقبل هذا الجزء الغريب عنا. إذا كنا غير قادرين الآن على أن نصنع انتصار حاسم باسترداد كامل الحقوق، وهنا أميز بين الحل السلمي الاستسلامي المرحلي الذي يسمى تسويات.
Many more people left because they were told that in a few days, or at worst a couple of weeks, they would return with the triumphant Arab armies to take their lands back and have more than they ever had before.
وهيك عشنا وقالوا لنا بعد 15 يوم ترجعوا ما رجعناش دملنا المفاتيح بالتراب.
Our leaders are the responsible ones, spreading rumors of massacres and atrocities committed by Jews. They distilled terror in our hearts until we ran, thus abandoning our homes to our enemies.
Today, the Palestinians claim a right of return to lands that were subsequently built up and fertilized and rendered very useful by the state of Israel. And they want to return to lands that do not resemble in any way the lands that they left. Overwhelming hostility in the Arab Islamic world to the state of Israel is largely based on religion.
فما ذكر بالقرآن هو الذي راح يصير يعني احنا وياه صراع من هلا يوم الدين وبإذن الله النصر سوف يطلع من داخل فلسطين. احنا باذن الله سوف نحرر انفسنا حتى لو استشهدنا كلنا كفايه ان نكسب الجنه كفايه ان نكسب كرسي في الجنه.
From the river to the sea, a riveting documentary by Pierre Rehov. Talk to us, please, about this right of return. Was this a mandate or is this a myth?
It's mostly a myth at this point. You have to understand the right to return of Palestinian so-called refugees inside the state of Israel would be the equivalent of sending inside the United States of America 300 million Arabs not speaking a word of English in the next day. This is basically the peaceful way by the Palestinians of destroying the state of Israel. In 1948, when the state of Israel was born, as you just saw in my film, the Arabs were called out of the state of Israel by the surrounding countries, and they thought they were going to be able to come back inside Israel after having destroyed Israel. 60 years later, it's the descendants of their descendants, 2 generations later, who still believe that it is still possible. And the problem, this is, I believe, the original sin, because without the mythology of the right to return, the peace process would be really possible. Because when Palestinians talk about having a state for themselves, and when the rest of the world is trying sometimes to help them, they're actually sending money which later on is spent into trying to destroy Israel instead of building a state.
So what we heard in that clip, basically what the Arab people and the Palestinians we heard, they said that their own people told them to run or else they'd be massacred, right. And whereas the Israelis said stay, and they were fearful.
Well, a lot of Arabs stayed. I mean, right now Israel is 6 million people, inhabitants, 5 million Jews, about 1 million Arab Muslims carrying an Israeli ID, you know. So to just say that Israel is a racist state when you have members of the Knesset who are Muslims, in the meantime, you have to know that about 1 million Jews were kicked out of Arab Muslim countries, including my own family, after 1948. And 600,000 of them fled to Israel, and they were welcome in Israel. At the very beginning, it was tough. They had to live in tents, but a few months later, it was temporary housing. And 20 years later, they were, real citizens of Israel with jobs and all that. What if the Jordans, the Syrians, the Egyptians, the Lebanese had done exactly the same thing with their brothers, Arabs, who had fled from the war zone of Israel and Palestinian territories? They would have had no problem.
So the Palestinians who fled, the neighboring Arab countries, were placed in these so-called refugee camps. Mm-hmm. And as we heard in one of those people said, they distilled terrorism in our hearts. I want to pursue that a little more when we come back, and we have another film clip that some of these thoughts and the politics are instilled in the young who are living in these camps. Stay with us as we continue our discussion with Pierre Rehov and about his documentaries about the crisis in the Middle East. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're with filmmaker Pierre Rehov, who has produced 2 incredible documentaries which really explore the underlying problems that have led to the conflict in the Middle East. In the documentary, you cite, at least what you've said afterwards, is that you characterize the Palestinians as endless losers, losers in an endless catch-22. What do you mean by that?
It's first of all, what I expressed there is to say that I feel very sorry for those poor people, because I spent a lot of time in the Palestinian territories, and it would be so simple, bottom line, for them to just create a country. But as long as they believe, as long as the rest of the world, including the United Nations, makes them believe that we can have much more than, for instance, what Ehud Barak was offering them at Camp David in 2000, as long as they believe that actually by doing what they do, we can refuse the existence of the State of Israel, they are just endless losers, because the right to return would be the destruction of the existence of Israel. By demanding the right to return, of course, we are never going to sign a peace with Israel.
The right of return, as you say, translates into the absolute destruction of Israel.
Absolute destruction, the peaceful destruction, because the next day you will have, your borders open to people who actually hate you, and what are they going to do?
As we heard the Hamas leader saying, Palestine is Egypt to Lebanon, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean.
Right. Actually, Palestine has never been a country. It's never been ever a country in the whole history. It's been an area of the Ottoman Empire until 1917. But the funny thing is that in this area called Palestine was included what is now Jordan. So actually 80% of Palestine, of the original Palestine, is already Jordan. So now 20% left is Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza.
You're very critical of the United Nations and the role UNRWA has played in the region in the past 50 years, and you say that the United Nations has really been involved in an act of deception in the region.
United Nations represents all countries of the world. Mainly at this point, you have a lot of former Soviet Union, former communist countries. Have it here in the United Nations. The Arabs represent many, many, many countries, third world countries which in the past were kind of becoming communist, now they are kind of becoming Muslim. So this huge mass of countries are mostly anti-Israel, and you add to that Europe, which has never been, 100% in favor of Israel. In the case of France, for instance, it's exactly the opposite, very pro-Arab country. So altogether, it's always a lost situation for Israel at the United Nations. Israel has been condemned in the UN more than any other country, including China. And Israel was even condemned by the UN in the 80s for trying to settle the Palestinians. You can find on the UN site condemnations of Israel asking for Israel to send the refugees back to the camps, when Israel was actually trying to have a social program, including building housing to the Palestinians outside of camps.
Now, these refugees really could have assimilated very well into any society in any of the Arab countries, the adjoining countries, whether it be Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt. But they became political pawns of the whole situation, did they not?
They have. It's so easy for Arab dictators, and there is no such a thing as an Arab democracy until now. But for most dictators, it's so easy to, in one hand, to stay a dictator, leave his people in misery, and put the blame on Israel.
You talk about the Palestinian democracy right now. That democracy is in the form of Hamas. Hamas, which has been recognized as a terrorist organization, which has carried out so many terror acts. People shake their head in wonderment. How did this ever happen, that Hamas rose to this position of such power?
First of all, Hamas, represent the religion of the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are fed with religion on a daily basis. It's not like in any other Occidental country where secular people run the actual fate of the people. In the case of the Palestinians, everything is religious.
But also, didn't it go to the fact that there's just total despair? They just felt that they got nowhere with Fatah and Yasser Arafat, and also there was such flagrant corruption that existed that they got nowhere, and out of this despair they said, okay, let's go to the more militant group, Hamas.
Yeah, it was a protest vote at the same time as it was a very, belligerent vote.
I want to take a break and go to something and point this out, that attitudes of despair and hopelessness, they develop very early on among Palestinians. Politics and emotions that often are transmitted from one generation to another. And it begins with the children and how they're taught. Here, again, another clip from Pierre Rehov's From the River to the Sea.
think there's any question that UNRWA, in its responsibility of making sure that education is delivered of students, that textbooks are available, and approving the curriculum that is used, that they are furthering this myth, this alleged right of return. That has helped create an environment where individuals inside these camps have refused to ever accept Israel's right to exist because they feel that that is contradictory to their alleged right of return.
واحنا بالنهاية مش لاجئين بحاجة لشوية دولارات أو بحاجة لباسبور. لو هذا الموضوع كنا من زمان أخذنا هالدولارات وأخذنا الباسبور وهلا بدولة أوروبية عايشين. عرفت كيف؟ كان هيك احنا لحد الآن بالمخيمات تحديدا محافظين.
So long as that right of return exists, and so long as people believe in the Palestinian communities that exists, there will be a virtual impossibility for peace to develop. The individuals inside of these camps, some of whom want to return to a life of normalcy, are unable to do so.
هؤلاء الآلاف من القساميين مع كل الشرفاء هم الذين أجبروا الاحتلال للانسحاب من قطاع غزة، وأن هذه الحشود الكبيرة من العسكريين من أبناء كتائب الشهيد عز الدين القسام سيبقون بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى يحملون البندقية ويحملون سلاحهم حتى تحرير كامل التراب والمقدسات والوصول إلى كامل الحقوق المشروعة الفلسطينية.
Frightening words. Is terrorism their only means to an end as far as they see it, as far as what they express to you?
In a way, yes, because they are believing in God before anything else. And what we see there has nothing to do with what they actually pretend toward the West. When they talk about wanting a country, actually what they want is to spread Islam, because most Palestinians reach a level now of brainwashing, because actually of Yasser Arafat being in power in this region for such a long, for the last 10, 15 years, and he's made sure that these people who never accept the existence of the State of Israel, in the meantime he was trying to fly around the world and to pretend he was making peace with Israel. But inside the Palestinian territories, on television, in the school books, everywhere, you would see nothing but call for hatred of the Jews. And this has, first of all, a religious angle.
We'll take a break. When we come back, I want to take a look at your other film and talk about it, called Suicide Killers. I have to tell you, Pierre has looked into the eyes. He's looked into the eyes of suicide killers, and want to hear what you have to say and what drives them to do it. A lot more to go to talk about when we come back on 11 News Close-Up. Stay with us. These days, suicide killers could be anybody. In his documentary, Suicide Killers, filmmaker Pierre Rehov has looked into the eyes of would-be suicide bombers and into the eyes of proud parents whose sons and daughters have actually achieved what they call martyrdom. Why do they do it? Here's a composite from Suicide Killers.
الانفجارات اللي صارت في لندن وزعنا حلو كتير لانه برضه هم هدول اعداء الاسلام وبيحاربوا بالاسلام.
بالنهايه هدفنا انه اي انسان اي بني ادم انه يحارب الاسلام يكون عدو للاسلام وللمسلمين، بالنهايه انه يعني يكون حلال الواحد يعني انه ينقتل يعني.
In any act of violence, first is the intent, then the action. But often the horrific action of the terrorist gets lost as the reasons for the slaughter become the main story, and the act itself is relegated to the background.
الشهيد عز الدين القسام إذ تعلن عن هذه العملية النوعية.
Beyond political aims, strategies, and causes, placing oneself only on a human level, a question suddenly becomes essential. How? How can a human being, often a very young one, accept sacrificing himself in the hope of causing death to as many different victims as possible?
زي ما كنت بس أنا اعتقلوني من مصر مدينة رام الله الساعة 4.
من داخل كهوم يعني بمصرية رام الله، فكانت تاني يوم العملية منفذة، فما صارش النصيب. يعني كان الحزام كنت شارحه أنا حطه ببتونيا، يعني بمنطقة بتونيا. أنا زعلت ما فرحتش، يعني نازل أنا عامل شيء مش خايف عليه يعني لحد الآن. فأنا فيش لي مشاكل مع العالم برا نهائية ولا مع أي بني آدم، وداخل السجن مفيش لي مشاكل مع حدا.
وغير أواعي، حكى أنا بدي أواعي غير هذولا وجيبي لي أواعي جداد لحسن نموت بعدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين. والحمد لله رب العالمين ما نقدرش نعمل أي حاجة، والله نور الشهادة وهو كان بيتمناها يعني في كل وقت وكل لحظة.
دائما يحكي في الجهاد في مقامه، وكان يحكي أنا نفسي أنول الشهادة وهيو الله نور الشهادة. وهو اللي بعته، يعني هو اللي أرسله أخوه أبو حذيفة حازم الحين، أخوه اللي استشهد الجديد.
فإحنا أولادنا يعني مربينهم على الجهاد والمقاومة وفيش إمكانية.
Chilling. Proud parents. Tell us, give us some more insight if you could, Pierre. You spoke to parents like these, and you spoke to those in prison who failed in their attempts.
The scary thing about it is that for them it is the absolute truth. For instance, I talked to one of the mother, the first thing she said to me was, "Thanks God my son is dead." So, you know, it's very hard for an Occidental to just adapt to such a rhetoric. And then I understood a little better what she was talking about, because her son in the past has been in Egypt. And he spent 3 years in Egypt, and he was giving her a phone call once in a while and writing to her. So in a way, she was almost expecting a phone call, I know it may seem ridiculous, or a letter from heaven. Because for them it is the absolute truth. There is no doubt about it. The son just went to heaven. So by doing this, he's gaining a lot of things according to Islam. He's getting 72 virgins. He's getting the right for taking 70 members of his family in heaven with him. The rewards is tremendous. And for people who are very, you know, on a daily basis, they don't have a very nice life, but not because of Israeli occupation. They just don't have a very nice life because of their culture.
Is it brainwashing? Is it
yes.
Indoctrination? You say religion plays a big part, but where in the Quran is anything like this written to suggest such actions?
It is.
It is in the Quran.
It is in the Quran. I mean, you then can interpret the Quran the way you want, but actually they were very happy to read me the surah being, you know, the verses of the Quran.
To give one's life in that manner?
Not, of course, the Quran, in the times of the Quran, there was not such a thing
right.
as a bomb.
Right.
Yeah, but they were talking about martyrs. The bad interpretation of the Quran is that in the Quran it talks about martyrs, namely people who have died for Islam in battle, in fighting. But for the Palestinians, this became blowing yourself up and killing innocent people is becoming a martyr.
As a mother told me in Rashidiyah, one of the refugee camps in southern Lebanon several years ago, she said, "There's no meaning to life without your homeland." So they're inculcated to have these feelings at an early age. We have a few moments left, but from your observations, Pierre, do you hold out any optimism, any hope that there'll ever be peace or soon in that region?
In a certain way, the Occidental world is very responsible for that, because listening to the Palestinians and not understanding what they say has made the Occidental world not let Israel take care of the situation the way they should have. As long as the Palestinians believe that they have one little chance to destroy Israel one day, they are just going to continue. The day they will think that the only future for them is to have a land, they will accept this land.
Pierre Rehov, thank you very much. And again, alert our viewers to the fact that Suicide Killers, this extraordinary documentary, will be seen at the AMC Theater on 42nd Street. It opens on August 25th, correct? And you can look for River to the Sea in DVD format in the next couple of months. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
That is our program. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, just log on to our website at WB11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.